The word actor brings to mind two polar extremes: stardom, seduction, fame, and fortune. Yet also living on pennies, dreams, and on other people's couches. Both legends and lost souls bound by a single word: actor. But the craft is more than just success, struggle, and serendipity. The craft is a mindset, one that can change the way you see yourself and the world around you. It sharpens your intuition, teaches you how to own the room and influence those around you. There's no better way to discover yourself than to first try on somebody else. It isn't Hollywood. It's not Broadway. This is Riddlesbrood. So welcome to the Acting Out Podcast. And now your host, Clyde P. Riddlesbrood.
Hello, this is Clyde P. Riddlesbrood today, also known as Ryan. And we have some pretty interesting and very fun things to discuss today on the Acting Out Podcast. And not only that, we have a very, very special guest, a friend of mine going back many, many years. His name is Terry O'Brien. And, well, without further ado, let me just say hello, Terry. Thanks for coming on today.
Hello, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Well, you know, me and Terry go back a long way. I actually got into acting at Elaines many, many years ago. And when I got out of the military, I believe it was 1995, Terry, you were the director there at the time.
Well, that's not possible. I was only 10 years old in 1995.
Yeah, you look 10 years old, I think so. But I think you were the director. You were the one in charge, and you were the one telling me to stop saying all the jokes that I kept trying to say.
Yeah, that sounds about right, Ryan. My memories of that time are a little hazy going back so far. But yes, I was sort of the de facto director at that point. It was my third season at Elaines Dinner Theater. And I was the only one left who knew where everyone was supposed to stand in a given show that we were doing. So some of them have directorship earned and others have it thrust upon them.
Well, I certainly remember those times fondly because even though I was new to the Elaine stage at the time, I had done some shows in the Army and some community theater stuff, but I had never been involved in the type of theater that I saw there, like the improvisation, the engaging the audience, the bigger-than-life personalities.
That was all very evident in your early performances.
Well, I would like to think it was, but at the time, I certainly didn't think I was up to the old dog standards like you guys. You guys seem to be able to get out there in front of the audience and dominate, and just such a big presence. You and Mike Massico and some of the other people, like of course, my father at the time.
The late, great Ron Long. If it makes you feel any better, my first season and a half or so at the dinner theater, I came in, I was the hotshot young person at that time coming down from a big theater in Delaware, and I knew it all. I could sing, I could dance, I could act. I was the best actor in the room, and I did the same thing. I saw this type of theater I'd never done before, and just sort of following the crowd at chow time. They were all improvising and ad-libbing, but the thing is they were good at it, and at that time I was not. Now, I thought I was good. And your dad, who ended up sort of being my mentor in this style of theater, was like, you know what? He gave me the stop sign. Just say your lines as written until I tell you otherwise. And so that, of course, was very difficult for the best actor in the world to hear. But I did it. And I just sort of watched your dad and Mike Massico, a fabulous improv actor at that time. And then Mike ended up leaving the theater later that summer, and I was asked to step into his role, which was one of the great roles in any show of any period, Justin Ogre in Evil Medieval, which I've played a million times. You played a million times. It's just a fantastic part. And then your dad said, okay, go ahead. And when he gave me the green light and I could ad-lib and improv, now I sort of had a better idea, a better feel for when to slide in an extra joke, when to give, just an extra look or give it another half a beat before you give a punchline to really make an audience react. And that was, a turning point in my life as a comedic actor.
Well, just for the people listening to this thing right now, the reason we jumped right into this is it's important for you guys to understand that you're probably listening to about, 30, 40 years of onstage experience right now. Many of us got our start in the mid-'90s. I've been doing thousands of shows since then. So it's just really amazing to chat a little bit about it because I know a lot of new people that are trying to get into the industry, maybe not sure how to be an entertainer, They're not really sure what it's like, and they see things on TV and they think it's like that. And it's really not. And one of the biggest things is when you do get into it, it's almost like an actor has to go through a couple different phases. The first phase for a lot of people is just to get the balls to do it,
right.
To get up there. And they might be used to community theater where they have 50 feet between them and the audience, or
right.
on a big stage, they're protected by distance. They're shielded.
The bright lights, you can't see the audience. You're performing for yourself and the people on stage with you.
And it's comforting to have that. But when you start doing dinner theater and, murder mystery shows and improvisational shows like Elaine's was at the time, you really are very naked in front of the audience. And when you get out there, you're like right next to them. You can touch them. And you feel like if you make a mistake, they're going to cut you in half with laser eyes.
Nowhere to hide.
Yeah, you're right. They're going to get you. So for a while, it really does take a lot of actors some time to get their sea legs. And usually what happens is right when they feel like they got a little bit of confidence, they go way overboard. Then all of a sudden they think they're great and they're out there improvising and they start dying and they forgot their discipline. And I think that's what you were kind of mentioning with my dad. You got the
Sure.
you got the bug and it's exciting, right. And I think I could do this. And then you start,
and especially when you walk into a show with some seasoned actors and you want to match that energy, you want to match that humor, you want to be as good as they are. And even though you might have the innate talent, it does take some time to hone. That is a skill that has to be honed. It's almost like doing stand-up. Mm-hmm. If you bomb on a joke, okay, well, I'm not going to do that again. If you bomb on the joke and then, well, they just didn't get it, so I'm going to do it over and over and over again. And man, what's wrong with this audience? They're just not responding to this hilarious joke that I just made. And after 20, 30 times, like, well, kid, maybe the joke's just not that funny.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes a while for people to realize that. And I think one of the good things, mentioning about the trying a joke a couple times, the wonderful thing about performing at Elaine's in the 90s at that time, at least for me, was that I could do the show and do it every single night. That's over right. And over and over again. And
sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Yeah. And the wonderful, great thing about that is if you had a joke, you could go out and do it. And then, that didn't quite work. And then you try it again the next day. And this time you have a slightly different spin on it, slightly different intonation of your voice. And then it gets a laugh. And eventually you can hone in on, I know exactly how to say this and how to mug my face and how to turn my head.
It can be emphasizing the right word a different way. It can be the side eye you give to your scene partner. It could be just an extra beat before you give a punchline. A 10-word joke, there's 50 ways to say it.
Yeah, and 50 ways to mess it up. The longer the joke, the more.
Oh, there's 1,000 ways to mess it up. There's about 4 ways to do it right.
Right. It was an amazing experience back then to learn the craft that way, and you were a big part of teaching me how to do that stuff. And I had my moments too, just like everybody else, where you get overconfident, you think, oh, I can do this, and you get out there and then you realize you're making 10 mess ups for every little good thing you do, and that's when the director has to beat you up a little bit and say, hey.
Right. You were never short on confidence.
Well, yeah, I had that. Not everybody has that, but the problem I lacked, I would argue, is discipline. Like I would be motor mouth when it wasn't appropriate, and I would.
We had a few high volume conversations in that era about how I wanted it done and how you wanted it done, and just learning to trust that I knew what I was talking about. Your dad was still around then, Ron Long, God rest his soul. He was really
he's brilliant.
The turning point for me. He was amazing. And I'm about the age he was then in 1995. And he just had that wealth of knowledge. And he went back to, the Three Stooges, vaudeville. I came up on Monty Python, SNL, the wonderful Christopher Guest movies that were all improv. And he was sort of the traditionalist, and he and I had many high volume conversations of that kind. And I was trying to sort of insert my own. I was sort of more of an absurdist, Monty Pythonist, and he was sort of a Three Stooges.
Right.
And so we butted heads a lot. But he eventually came to realize, maybe this this young guy knows a little bit about what he's doing. Now, it took hundreds of shows for him to trust me to put my spin on his vision, because he was the writer, the director, the producer, the star of most of them. And I eventually sort of stepped into his role, and I adopted a lot of his vision and ideas and techniques, added my own spin, and then tried to pass that along to the next generation, which really was with you and that crew in the late 90s. I
mean, the one thing that you mentioned on how he had more of a vaudevillian kind of like a style, and you had more of like a Simpsons, more modern, postmodern kind of, and you know, I think the trick is that you learn is neither of them are right or wrong. They're both different slight frequencies of the same concept. And what I found out as I got older is doing a lot of shows is, you know, you can use and switch different styles depending on the demographic and depending on the show. And sometimes you might be doing a show with an audience and a certain kind of humor just doesn't seem to be hitting.
Correct.
They're not, for some reason, they're not loving you. They're not buying it. They're not in the groove. And then sometimes they might like a different kind of humor.
Right.
And that's why the way we do our shows at Riddlesbrood is we have a lot of archetypical characters that are really, they have a name and a little bit of a backstory, but they're really like an archetype of a certain kind of character. And sometimes when you do a show, we've had it where we have a character that's very much like a ridiculous, absurd clown. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I would say like 60% of the times, that character is usually the one the audience loves the most because they're the most ridiculous, they're the most funny.
They're set up that way.
But then there's other characters that are more like subtle, and a lot of times they don't get the laughs, but then depending on the audience, depending on the environment, all of a sudden the audience likes that.
Right.
And the clown character isn't getting the love they usually do. And over the years, you know, you're like, you can kind of feel it. Like, oh, I can tell this is not that kind of show, guys, you know. And when you're really good actors and you have a nice team and a nice chemistry, everybody knows when to step back or step forward, because at the end of the day, the audience loving us as a total is really more important than them just liking your joke.
That is 1,000% correct, and it comes to light oftentimes at my singing gigs. I sing 4 or 5 nights a week for 30 weeks a year in the summer. And, you know, you have your Margaritavilles and your Brown-Eyed Girls, with your songs that we've all sung and heard a million times, and I'm sick to death of singing them. I'm sick to death of hearing them. So I try to steer my partners into more sort of modern stuff, Dawes, REM, not that the REM is modern, but sort of more alternative, more interesting stuff that's interesting to me. And you know, 2 or 3 songs into a set, like, yeah, they're not really loving the newer stuff, so let's just do Don't Stop Believin'.
Right,
they'll tip us, they'll have more drinks, everyone leaves happy, except the singer, but it's not about me leaving happy. It's about entertaining the audience.
Well, you know, I think when you're younger, when I first got into it, and you mentioned earlier, like the character Justin Ogre in the show Evil Medieval that we did there, and that's like a really, a very great show because it gives the character so much power and flexibility. I mean, that character Justin Ogre, which is effectively kind of like a jester, a hunchback, he is, you know, the butt of a lot of jokes, but also simultaneously really more intelligent than everyone else. So he's kind of like the everyman, if you want to look at it that way. But the beautiful thing about that character is, you know, you really have a really strong connection with the audience, and it can give you a little bit of an ego.
Absolutely.
Because you go out there and the audience loves you. You know, the curtain call happens and all the other actors come out, and then you come out and it's like, ah! You know, it begins to make you think, hey, I'm great. The thing that you learn later on, though, is that it's actually better for everyone to like the whole show, because sometimes if they just like you and they don't like some of the other characters, there's less total laughter. Like,
right.
The whole thing is not as good. And that's what I learned. A lot of times if I notice that the audience isn't like loving me, I switch gears to all of a sudden be like a supporting role. Like when anybody else tells a joke, I'll make sure to mug or react really with a big facial expression to try to help their joke along. And it's not just that I'm trying to I guess I would say it's almost like egotistical in a way to still be a good supporting actor, because at the end of the day, I just want to hear the laughs.
Right.
You
will never hold an audience in your hand and control them with a roll of an eye, a twitch of an eyebrow, telling a joke the way I did in 1995, playing Justin Ogre with 150 people in the theater, all waiting for the next thing that you're going to do so they can just laugh in the aisles again. A 90-minute show taking 2 hours because you're getting just so many laughs. It's a minute or two before you can even give the next line. But you're not the only person on that stage.
Right.
And if you take an ego in and you start even trying to add more and more and more to that, that's when it can get a little out of control from an actor standpoint.
I do think a lot of times an actor over time will learn naturally just by getting rubbed by the sandpaper of an audience after show after show. They usually will eventually learn, okay, this isn't all about me, because they'll be taught the same way. Like if you go out there, because if everybody doesn't like if the show isn't liked in general, you'll notice that even if you get a laugh, it's not as good as a laugh,
right?
Because it's being held down. So, I think, now let me ask you this, Terry. Like when new actors are trying to get into the craft and they see maybe folks like you or like really talented people, people that have been doing this a long time, I'm sure it can be a little bit intimidating for a new actor to try to get in there and, try to be one of the team and one of the gang simultaneously standing next to a god that's done this and the audience loves them. How did you used to deal with new actors in that circumstance?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I tried to give them all sort of a pep talk. Look, in a new season, we'd get 3 new actors and have 5 holdovers who have done hundreds of performances and know the lines inside and out. We know the characters inside and out. As you know, in those days, we'd sometimes just switch characters around, not because we wanted to, because of the vagaries of scheduling. Some people had day jobs, couldn't make a matinee. So you know what? I'll play these parts. You play those parts. You've heard them enough. You know how I do it. Just jump out there and do it. Or, we'll combine these 2 parts. And there was a Western show where we went from 8 actors to 4, and I ended up playing 5 parts. So every second I wasn't on stage, I was off stage changing into my next costume. And walking into an environment like that, I just used to tell them, learn your lines, write down your blocking. Ryan, that was write down your blocking, which Ryan never did, of course. And just, know your lines and trying to bump into the furniture. And do it as written. And as you very well know, Ryan, the first couple rehearsals, don't start trying to throw in your ad libs and your improvs. Let's just, and I'll tell you, you know what? I love it. Do it in 2 weeks. Right. Let's get the show open. Let's get up and running. And then you have carte blanche. Do whatever you want. If I don't like it, I'll tell you. If I do like it, I'll tell you. And what did I used to tell you all the time was, I like it. I don't love it.
Right. Yeah.
But thanks for trying. And just be confident and just do the basics. The big thing for me, a little bit of a technique I learned in college that I've passed along in colleges about 100 years ago now. I had a public speaking class, and I might be jumping ahead in the agenda here, but I would give everyone their script and say, take this pencil and underline every word of your lines in your script. Underline them once. Now, the words you want to hit a little harder, put a second underline. And the words you really want to punch, put a third underline. And that does a couple of things. It's sort of, if you're focusing on one line for 3, 4, 5 minutes, you're going to sort of know that line. Mm-hmm. And then when you get on stage, if you lose a line, you can sort of think back on sort of the Morse code that you've written under these lines. And maybe that helps you. And I always would tell everyone, when you're studying your script, hold it in front of you like it's on a music stand, because if you lose your line on stage, if you're learning it, holding it down your lap, you're going to look down to your lap.
That's interesting.
To try and find the line. But if you're used to having it in front of you, you won't do the thing. And the most important note I've ever given any actor is plant your feet.
No happy feet.
Pretend your feet have nails through them, and you stay in that spot, because when your feet start going, then your legs start going, your body starts going, then your mind starts going. And if you get lost, you're going to stay lost. Now, with us, a lot of times we would all know the script inside and out. But in a new show, well, I don't know what's coming up next. I can't cover this guy. I feel
Then
so
you're
bad
really-
for him. I mean, we had a guy in the Western show come out, and he got about halfway through Act 1 playing the sheriff, and he couldn't get a line out. He was fine in rehearsal. Got to opening night. He was feeling good. And halfway through Act 1, we're like, well, oh, my gosh, look out. Here comes the marshal. And the marshal doesn't enter. Like, well, I said, here comes the marshal. Maybe he's down in the dressing room, didn't quite hear us. Hey, why don't we send someone out to the barn to see if we can find the marshal? And, well, Sheriff, the marshal's gone. Well, okay. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute intermission, come back, and he was just gone. We never saw him again. He was there for a week for rehearsals.
He probably was so embarrassed.
And you know what? It gets you. You were there when the gentleman who used to play Scrooge years and years and years ago volunteered to play Samuel Clemens in the New Year's Eve show. And Samuel Clemens was sort of a bookend. It was a Western show. Samuel Clemens was the bookend. He would introduce Act 1 and then take an intermission, come out and start Act 2 and give a little speech and then give the speech at the end.
Right.
And he got out on stage, and a seasoned older guy, he could not get a line out. And I kept trying to send your dad out. I was like, Ron, you got to go save him. He's like, I can't. I'm in my other costume. I was like, just go. And your dad got him through the first one, and then he left as well. A guy who'd done thousands of performances, hundreds and hundreds of performances as Scrooge.
Right.
I believe his name was Austin.
I don't think I ever met. I think he might have been right before me. Yeah,
and he was going out as I was coming in. But that and all you can do, and it's like when you do something like that, you feel like everyone's mad at me, everyone hates me, everyone's upset with me. When all we feel is sympathy because we've been there.
The only question I would say on that is, I would agree with you that all you feel is sympathy, with a few exceptions. And the exception is, and you kind of hit on this earlier, when a new actor is out there, you don't know your script, and they're already trying to improv, they're trying to ad lib, they're trying to stick their own stuff in there, but they do not have a command of the lines. They do not have a command of their character. They really don't have their own under control. And what that basically means, right? Yeah. We're allowed to say these kind of things because it's not going on the air, right? So anyway, but my point is they have to learn that, listen, you know, even if you have a funny ad lib, if right after your ad lib and you get a laugh, you stumble over your next line and you look like an idiot, you've just lost cred. Right. And the audience is just keeping a mental score. And if you tell a funny joke, okay, maybe you get a point or two. But then if you stumble and look stupid and have a lot of ums and ahs, you're losing cred. So, you know, you have to master to make sure you know your lines first and know how to get through that before you say these little ad libs. And even if they're funny, because the idea is the ad lib will then give you more credibility. They'll love you more. You'll train the audience.
The audience knows if you know what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Or not.
Oh, and they're nervous about it. And they can see somebody. That's when you were mentioning about people can have happy feet and they're like moving around. They're looking down. You know, the better you are as an actor, you begin to realize that the one thing you can never do is show them that you don't know what you're doing. Even if you don't know what you're doing, do it with confidence.
Right.
Because if they start seeing you looking like you're lost, you'd be better off just being big and being crazy and wacky and just hoping to God somebody saves you before you run out of material than to all of a sudden close in on yourself and be like, oh. Yeah.
Well, I had a character I was playing at very late notice. I'd seen the guy do the part several times. I was like, hey, Terry, you got to play this part. It was Master Locke in Evil Medieval. And for whatever reason, this guy didn't show up, couldn't make it. I forget the circumstances. But you're him tonight. I'm like, okay, I've heard him do it 8-10 times. I can get through this. But he has a little monologue right before intermission. And I'm with like the one barmaid character. And we have this back and forth. We do a song. And we get out of the song. I'm like, okay, and that's 1 beat, 2 beat. The applause has faded away. 3 beats. And nothing.
Right.
I had nothing. So I just looked to my co-star and was like, well, what's next? And of course, her reply was, I have no idea.
Right.
Like, well, let's talk about the weather. And then she eventually got us back on track. But man, you lose that line and you take a breath and the stage expands 50,000 feet in front of you and you start feeling the trickle of sweat down the back of your head. And like, oh boy, here we go. There's no worse feeling.
Well, that's the wonderful thing about what I learned from my dad. And that's to have have a little toolbox of jokes and bits that are somewhat universal. So if you run out of, like, one of the things that he used to do that I still do now, even to this day, if I'm out there doing a character and I'm doing my lines and I said, oh, I think I hear somebody coming in. They might be the suspect that we've heard about. And then nobody comes in. If I'm waiting for a few moments, maybe I'll tell a quick joke. If I still don't see anybody, and you'll recognize this, I come out and say, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, before I was a cowboy, I was also a psychic, and I could read minds. And then you start doing the Karnak bit that you know, where you read the minds and have a whole, like, 15-minute spiel.
Right.
So,
of course, the best way to avoid all of this is to know your lines.
Yes, of course. That
the first thing you do.
The tricky thing, too, is the wonderful thing about Elaines was that you were doing the same show over and over a lot. So you got really, 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 really good. The one thing about when we started Riddlesbrood is I had the idea in my mind that, oh, it'll be just like that. You know, we're going to do shows at restaurants. Very quickly, we realized that, okay, this is a completely different kind of animal. The main thing is every show is completely different. So if you're going to do a show, it's in a different room. It's in a different business. It's with a different, you know, table setup, you know. Not only that, you're probably performing with different actors that never did it before. It's almost like every show is completely unique. And you have no traditions or familiarities to fall back on. The only thing you have is what's in your head.
Right.
And that creates another level.
The anxiety of,
the
I sure hope that
anxiety.
guy learned his lines.
Well, you know, it's anxiety, but it's also, again, we're at the point now where we can pretty much, we don't even think about it. We just show up. Okay, that's the room. Great. Show me where I'm walking around. And then you just, you know, you have your jokes, you have your bits. So it is a lot like stand-up comedy, but you know that you can do different bits for different kinds of audiences. And depending on how an audience member might look, maybe they're wearing a funny shirt or something that you can leverage.
Right.
But that's the one thing that makes traveling theater even more challenging, because you really have to have that toolbox of funny bits and skits so that you can get by, especially, like you said, the difficulties of scheduling. You know, that always is the case. Somebody can't be available. You got a new person. They don't know the lines. A lot of times you just got to roll all over them to get the show done.
Right. And you speak of different audiences in different rooms. You and I just recently did Scrooge for 2 weekends outside in the blistering cold on 3 different sets over 3 different acts. And then the next week we did it down in Roanoke, Virginia, in a big, giant, old traditional theater.
Right.
And you could not design 2 more different venues to perform that show in.
Right.
But as long as you have the core, the actors knowing what they're doing, and lights and costumes, you're going to be okay.
Well, you know what? I think when you say the core, you know, the really advanced actors that know what they're doing, it's all in them. They don't need the lights. You know, you don't need the sound effects. You don't need the mic. You don't need all those accoutrements. They're nice to have, but we're so used to working in the raw, right next to somebody, and you can smell their breath. You know, they're right next to you. You only have you. So then when you move from that environment to a real stage where you actually have all the different things that people would like, lighting and sound and special effects in a set, that just
those are luxuries.
Amplifies your power, right? It's amazing. So that's why I tell sometimes young, you know, actors and people that are looking to get into the craft, you know, don't snub your nose up at like touring theater or like little murder mystery shows, because actually you're going to learn the most and the best lessons in that environment. Because if your baseline is community theater, then that's it. Because, you know, you're not always going to have a set. You're not always going to have a costume designer that's going to rush out and put the costume and wig on you. You'll be a stronger, more well-rounded actor to start off in that touring murder mystery dinner theater environment.
Community theater, absolutely. To this day, I don't like George Clooney because he cracked some joke on Leno or Letterman about he would just come up with ER, right? He's like the biggest, the hottest guy in the world, right? People's sexiest man alive. And Letterman's like, so what about this? It's like, well, I better do more stuff because if not, I'll end up at, you know, Rosemary's Dinner Theater. I was like, I was like, you know, there's
Very elitist.
There are thousands of actors working in this country right now in dinner theaters, in community theaters, who are doing it because they love the craft. They love acting. They might be a plumber 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, but they go out at night. They commit the time and the effort to go be in a show in their local dinner theater or community theater. So that's nothing to be made fun of, George Clooney, if you're listening.
No, it's not. And there's a lot to be proud of by learning how to take your knocks at that level. And I even hate to say the word level because it implies that there's like some kind of hierarchy of legitimacy and touring theater and murder mystery and dinner theater is at the bottom. And I don't really feel that that's an accurate assessment. In some ways, I would say it requires more talent, more discipline, and more ability at that lower level. And if you're at a higher level, it actually is easier. Everything's easier.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of tricky that way.
I've worked on, the thousands of shows at Elaines, and I would assert that my run at Elaines from my first run from like 93 to 99, some of the best theater ever performed in this country during that era happened at Elaines Dinner Theater because the shows were so funny, the actors were so good, and the audience are just, you were there for them. They're just roaring with laughter.
Yeah.
And you're not getting that in every theater you go into in the country.
Well, you know what? There's another aspect to that too, and this is something that we've taken away from my dad's shows at Elaines back in the day into the Riddlesbrood Theater Company, and it's kind of an inversion of the idea of the director is the visionary and the, I guess, dictator, if you will. And the actors are puppets. And the idea of, in order to get a great show, you have to have as great control, and the actors have to, follow their instructions to the letter. Now, that might be true for like opera or big theater productions, but I found that the opposite is true because in sometimes, especially with improvisation, having a little bit of chaos where the director, it's like, I don't have time to go over your scene, guys. You just got to, just figure it out, man. Get out there.
Here are the pages. Yeah. Here's your costume.
Right. Go. Now, that might be considered unprofessional. And maybe under wonderful circumstance, that wouldn't be the case. But unfortunately, that's the kind of situation you're dealt with. And, that little bit of chaos, though, really forces the actors to have to rise up into the challenge and really make it better. And I would even say a lot of times at Elaines, my dad would have some pretty, less than polished scripts.
That's one way to put it.
Yes.
Being very diplomatic.
Yeah. And honestly, we could turn that awful thing into something it did not deserve to be. Like, the show would be way funnier because of the individual talented people bringing it to life than the script ever deserved to be.
Who understood what the sort of DNA of the show was.
Right.
You do a couple of shows in Elaines, okay, this is the vibe. Here's this script that is, 75% finished.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's opening day. Are we going to get the last half of Act 2, Ron? It's printing right now, my printer. Okay. Well, it's intermission. If we could get the last pages of Act 2, that would be very helpful for all of us. And I always joke, because I'm in some bands and we do some tribute shows and, hey, do we have time to rehearse She's Always a Woman by Billy Joel? It's like, nah, it's just piano and me, and we have time. And, we don't want to be over-prepared for these things. So there's a certain truth in that. You want that sort of energy of the unknown. My first show at Elaines, I had 3 weeks to learn this, the Blue Moon Cafe, which is like a retelling of It's a Wonderful Life set to 50s rock and roll music. And that was great. I learned my lines. I got to watch the cast do it 8-10 times. Went up in that show, and it's like, here's your script for Evil Medieval. You go up on Monday. Oh, okay. So that's how this is going to be. So you just bury your head in your script, and if I knew if I got through my opening monologue, which was like 3 pages, then I would be okay. And the other actors would carry me, and as long as I had the gist of what's going on in the scene, where we're supposed to start, where we're supposed to end up, I knew we could get there.
Well, that's an interesting thing you mentioned, too, and I think it's something that young actors just getting into the entertainment industry often don't understand, and that's the idea of like this concept of professionalism. And, that's not the right way to do things. That's not the way it's done. And I think a lot of times I've seen this where actors have maybe only been in a community theater show or a few of those kind of things. And they just don't know how, theater really runs in the real natural ecosystem, right. And the fact of the matter is you're always in a situation where you don't have as much money as you wish you had. You don't have the budget. You don't have the actors that you wish you had. Oh, the show was supposed to be for 6 actors. Well, we only got 5. So we got to do it. We got to do it in 10 minutes. So figure it out. And a lot of new actors will look at that chaos and say, this is unprofessional. This is ridiculous. I do not wish to be involved in such things. And then they, go off and work at Starbucks and don't ever do a show again. And that's fine. They're left with the concept that they knew better. But really what they're just doing is they're just eliminating themselves.
Right.
The reality is unfortunately theater is not a high margin business. And you got to make it happen with what you got.
I used to get, when I was sort of running Elaines for the latter half of my first run there, we get a lot of Temple grads. We just had this pipeline from the Temple theater studies to Elaines. And they knew everything. They were like me when I first got there. And I would look at them 3 years down the road and go, oh, my poor, sweet summer child. We have such delights to show you. Here is your script. Please come in Monday and know your lines, write everything down. And for instance, there was one actress. It's a show. She's a princess. It's sort of a Renaissance era. Mm-hmm. What's the romantic era? What am I?
Fantasy, there you fairies.
Go. Yes. And she has a speech. And I was like, okay, go downstage right. And you're going to give this speech up into the heavens. It's like, well, why am I doing that? What's my motivation? She said, what's my motivation?
Oh, boy.
The bane of every director that ever lived. It's like, well, every star in the sky is a late queen or a late princess who was passed on into the next realm. And so you're giving your speech to your sisters in the heavens and seeking their guidance. So that's why you're delivering the speech to the heavens. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, that's great. That works. It's like, and every other time I tell you to talk to this guy, that's your motivation for that scene. Also, you get paid on Friday.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of times people don't realize it's like the optimum conditions is not the only conditions. It's like maybe in basic training they taught you, oh, this is how you oil your weapon and make sure it's properly. You take it apart on a nice little mat and it's all nice and easy. And then yeah, but when you're in the field and the enemy's coming out of a trench with a bayonet and they're charging you, guess what? You're
in
not
a sandstorm.
You're going to have to just make it happen and deal with what you got. And that happens a lot in entertainment, and that's stressful for new folks. But if you don't quit, you're gonna wind up being one of the people that can handle that. And I mean, you were mentioning about hey, you're gonna get Act 2. There was many times at Elaines, and honestly, even very rarely now, but back in the day, where we would say, well, we got the shows tonight. We ran out of time. We don't have enough time. But remember the show we did last time? It was like a medieval show. Well, we're just going to do the same end as that, and you're just going to change your names.
Going to put a new skin on it.
Right. We're just going to put a new skin over it. But just do the same lines and just spin it as best you can. And we would get through things, and you'd actually be amazed at how often the audience would still love you. Because at the end of the day, if you have the power, the vibe, the energy, and you know how to get the love of the audience, they're not going to know about all those imperfections, but you have to be able to be flexible and adapt. That's what I've always learned.
I agree. Stay frosty, as I say.
Stay frosty. I don't even know what our time is at this point, but I will say this. There's something else I wanted to chat a little bit about, and that is just for young people. I know sometimes they don't always understand why something is funny. And usually this comes into a circumstance where somebody would say, hey, I hear you doing a joke and it gets a laugh. And then you're telling me not to do the joke. And that's just because you just want the laughs and you don't want me to have the laughs. And it's like, well, not really. The reason is because when you say it wrong and the joke falls flat. And then that pulls the whole show down. So until you can master how to say a joke properly, that specific joke, I don't want you to say it. And they sometimes get annoyed. Well, like, who are you? Who are you to tell me that I'm not good at it? And it's like, well, the wonderful thing about theater is it really is one of the few things in the world that is a pure meritocracy. If somebody walks out there and can say a joke every time and it gets a great laugh and they love them, and then you walk out and say the same joke and you don't, that means you stink or didn't do it right, right? It's just that simple. It's just that simple. There's no subjective reasons why.
Well, it's an old adage, like, I can't walk into a courtroom and say, hey, I'm a lawyer. I can't walk into a hospital and say, hey, I'm a doctor. But anyone can walk into a theater and say, hey, I'm an actor.
Right. Yeah. I never thought of it that way.
Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not.
I mean, it is amazing because we used to have these battles sometimes where we would tell some people, like, listen, don't ad-lib yet. Just do. You're telling us.
I'm having PTSD flashbacks right now to 1993.
But we still get that. We still get that because we'll go out there and we'll be getting laughs and the audience will really like us. And then some new people will be like, they don't really know their lines. They don't really know what they're doing. And then they'll say one joke. Backstage, they found it on their phone. They found this joke they think would be great. And they're all excited about it. And they get out there and then they tell that joke. But what they did is they used all their brain matter to just get that squeak out. And then maybe it got a laugh. And then they're done. They don't know what to do next. They stand there. And it's like, no, see, that's what you do. You screwed yourself. You got to be able to do the joke and not fall down and scrape your knee right after.
In the natural flow of events.
Right.
Throw an ad lib out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to do it on somebody else's line. Do it on your own line. That's a thing that you see
and
people.
Then you have the kids that I'm going to take my script home and I'm going to write in where I'm going to do all my ad libs and where I'm going to do all my improvs, which is sort of the antithesis of doing an ad lib and an improv is overthinking it. It's just have to let it come. Good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Right.
So I know how to do it. So just do it the way I'm doing it.
Right.
And I'm pretty good at it. I'm probably not the best at it,
right?
But I know what I'm doing here in this particular venue, so maybe just try it my way.
Yeah,
and we'll get you where you need to be.
Well, a lot of people too, they don't understand how important it is just to have the right tone, saying it the right way. Like we used to have this. There's a guy. He's a real nice guy. I don't want to mention him by name. I don't want to get anybody annoyed. But there was a joke that he had that he used to say as one of his characters. It was like this Viagra joke. Right. And all it was I recently just got out of rehab. Yeah. I was addicted to Viagra. Oh, it was the hardest time of my life. Bang, boom. Now, that's a funny joke. It gets a lot of laughs. But when this one actor tried to do it, he would always say it too quickly and he wouldn't pause. So he wouldn't pause in the proper way and it would just never get a laugh. And then I would say, you gotta pause here and don't say it so fast. But it just, no matter I could tell that he didn't want to hear direction. He was offended about it a little bit.
No actor wants to be told how to say a line.
That must be shed because the problem is sometimes a line needs to be said exactly right. Otherwise it won't work. Now, if a joke is so good and you can say it a lot of different ways, great, but that's rare. Some jokes are only good in a very specific circumstance. and honestly, I'm the first one to cheat. Like, I would even tell some actors, hey, listen, steal my joke. I'll come up with something else. If you think that's funny, say it and try that joke.
That was a big thing at Elaines back in the day. You would do your ad lib and then your co-star
would steal it.
I wouldn't get mad. I was like, all right, okay, that's how it's going to be. So I would just come up with a new one. And then somebody else would steal that one. It became a little bit of a competition.
Well, what's even worse.
I always won, though. I was always the winner.
I find it even worse, though, when somebody does a joke that you usually do. And every actor has a little bit of a, like I said, a toolbox, and you might have a couple jokes. And they know, Ryan always does that joke. And then you walk out and do the joke. And then, that person was backstage at the time. And then they walk out and then do the same joke and look like an idiot. So it's like, don't do that joke because I do that.
You liked it once. It's got to be even better.
It's like, you just made yourself look dumb. Or the reverse, which is even worse, which is they do your joke and you didn't hear it. And you walk out and do it, and they look at you, and you're like, oh, you bastard. So, these are all the fun improv theater things.
Yeah.
But
well, I found that as I've gotten older, I was the when I first took over the mantle of director, I was the yeller, the screamer. No, do it this way. No, no, no. And then as I grew older and I became the sort of writer, director, artistic, I learned, to mellow out. And sometimes people just can't do the thing the way you want them to do it. Right. They don't have that ability.
Right.
There was an actress in a show, a Sherlock Holmes show I did. She was playing Mrs. Hudson. And this is, do it this way. And this is your body language. And she would say, okay, I thought I will do it this way again. And she would do it that way for 3 shows and then go back into the old way of doing it that was not the way I wanted it. And after like my 4th or 5th time of having that conversation, I was just like, you know what? She just can't do it.
Right.
She's trying her best. She was a lovely lady, very nice professional, showed up on time, knew her lines. And I'm just not going to keep browbeating her over this. This is how she's doing it, and I'm going to live with that. And, we all have our limitations. There's things I can do that you can't do. There's things you can do that I can't do.
Well, that's tough in this day and age because I know there's all this vibe of, equality, I guess you would say, or nobody wants to feel that you can't say you're better than me or vice versa. But the problem is it doesn't really bear out in reality. Like when you're doing a show, I mean, there's been a couple times, many times, especially in the past where an actress or an actor will come up to me and say, I don't think it's fair that, you're on one hand saying, don't do that, don't do an ad lib, but then you're out there doing all these ad libs, and it's like I don't want to have to say the brutal truth, but I can't play basketball like Jordan, right? And if I went to go out on the field and on the court and try to play basketball, and Jordan's hitting every single dunk and I'm looking like a dope, is it really fair for me to say no fair? He's better than me. And sometimes you just have to accept that some people just have more talent. It's one of those things. Some people are better. We've had people that come in from college, they got their master's degree in theater, and they walk in, and then the waiter who never did anything in his whole life is just better,
right? Just
naturally better. And it's just the way it is. You can't do anything about it.
No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. I got my degree. I got this. I got that. Here we go. And oh boy, that's not how it works at all.
Well, I tell you what. Well, you know what? It was really great working with you back in the day, Terry. And it's always fun every once in a while getting a chance to work with you again. And I just hope to say this on our closing argument as just that if you're a new actor or actress, or you're a parent and you have a kid that wants to get into the craft, just keep in mind that it's important to stick with it and listen to the director, listen to the people that are there that have been doing this for a long time because they really do want to help you. They really do want you to be better. It doesn't help the show for them to put you in a corner. It helps the show for them to bring you up, but you have to open your ears and you have to be willing to do that.
Be someone that can be relied upon.
Yes, that's another thing. Well,
thanks for asking, Ryan, but I am playing with the Terry and Jerry acoustic duo all summer long.
I apologize. I fall upon my knees.
That's the only reason I came here today, Ryan, was to plug my gigs.
All right, plug your gig.
Terry and Jerry are playing Thursday nights at Jersey Girl in Wildwood. We're playing Friday nights at Joe's Fish, also in Wildwood. We're playing Saturday afternoons at Pig Dog, also in Wildwood. And those are all 3 Maury's Piers affiliated restaurants. And then every Sunday, Terry and Dave are doing sort of an acoustic plus karaoke show at the Rusty Nail in Cape May. And look me up on Facebook, Terry O'Brien. My picture is a monkey holding a newspaper that says Space Chimp Lives, which I'm going to call my next band, I think.
Well, what about the Exit Zero?
No longer affiliated with Exit Zero. Thanks for bringing that up, Ryan.
But wait a minute. But you still do have an Undertow.
I have an online column I write once or twice a week. It's called The Undertow. That's on Substack. If you just Google The Undertow, Terry O'Brien, that should take you right there. You can sign up for the free previews, or if you want to spring, it's $5 a month. And I write 4 to 8 columns a month, just general humor, observations, anecdotal, lots of movies and TV stuff, and lots of jokes I can't say on this podcast.
And you don't write that using ChatGPT. You write it out of your own mind.
I write it out of my own mind on my own laptop. And just, come see me at the Old Navy in Rio Grande. My day job.
Well, that's great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. And also to remember about Riddlesbrood Touring Theater Company. You need a private party, any kind of event, birthdays, fundraisers, bankruptcies, foreclosures, anything. Give us a call. We'll do a great show for you. www.riddlesbrood.com.
Thank you, Ryan. Is that my check?
No, you're not paid.